Another very common task for a vSphere administrator is updating your vSphere environment. vSphere has a feature for this, which used to be called vSphere Update Manager. It's now called vSphere Lifecycle Manager. We go to Menu and take a look at Lifecycle Manager. First of all, we have the image depots. We can use this to do upgrades to our vSphere host. So there's an important distinction in this of upgrade versus update. So an upgrade is going between vSphere versions, so from 7.0 to 7.0 update 1 or update 1A. And there is updates, which is patches. It's fixes for issues in the current vSphere version. We also have more recently this feature for vendor add-ons. So if we are running on a supported HP, Lenovo, etc. server, then we can also get updates for our HPE, Lenovo, etc. drivers and firmware packages, all integrated into the lifecycle management tool. And this is a new feature for Lifecycle Manager in vSphere 7. And then we have the components here. So the components are updates to drivers, etc., that feed into the vendor add-ons. Under updates, we have a list of all of the patches in the update. So you can see vSphere ESX 6.5 updates in there, 6.7, and some for 7.0.1. At the moment, we're only showing roll-up updates, but if we untick that, we get 28 pages worth of individual packages as well. So roll-up updates contain a batch lot of updates and patches rolled up into a roll-up update. Imported ISO, so we can download an ISO from the VMware website and load that in here if we wish, and use that to perform a host upgrade. And baselines, we configure baselines which contain certain patches by default, which we then apply to the hosts to check if they are compliant with those updates, and if they aren't, to remediate them. As you can see, there are 3 baselines predefined there. We have non-critical host patches, critical host patches, and host security patches. So critical host patches are things about stability usually, and host security patches are just that, they're about security, which of course are always important. And then non-critical is everything else. And then in settings, we have the details of how we are downloading these patches. So we download patches every day at 6:57 p.m. and it will show as a task in the task scheduler of vSphere Lifecycle Manager update download. We can update that if we wish to. You probably wouldn't bother. Patch setup, where is it going to get those patches from? Now you may want to do change download source. What you can do is, if you have a compliance department or a Q&A department who will download the patches, test them, and then release them to you in a shared repository, you might want to do that so you're getting the patches that have been tested by your own QA department. We have some default remediation settings. So VM power state, we'll take a look at these. So enable quick boot. Enable quick boot means that when the host is rebooted, instead of completely reinitializing the hardware, which can take a long time on some hosts, it will just stop the ESX operating system and restart it without reinitializing the hardware. VM power state, you're going to generally leave this to do not change power state. You can tell it to suspend or power off the VMs when you perform remediation, but in most cases what you're actually going to want to do is migrate the VMs to another host. To do that, it's going to put the host into maintenance mode, And then DRS will kick in if it is in fully automated mode to move the VMs to another host. However, if you don't have DRS, you're going to need to do that manually. It's unlikely you are going to want to set this to power off. Migrate powered off and suspended VMs to other hosts. So if we have VMs which are powered off and suspended on the hosts that we are installing patches to, then what are we going to do with those? We're going to wait 5 minutes for the host to go into maintenance mode, and we're going to try 3 times to do so. We can disable HA admission control on the cluster. Now I'm going to enable this because what this can cause is for the remediation to fail when we only have 2 hosts. Because, as you will recall from the HA modules, admission control prevents you powering on VMs if there is not adequate resource in the pool. However, if you put one of those hosts into maintenance mode, by definition there is no longer adequate resources in the pool. So we're going to want to turn that on for our lab here, because otherwise we could get a couple of issues whilst it's performing remediation. So with this set, it will turn off admission control, it will perform the necessary remediation, and then it will re-enable admission control. You can also disable DPM, so distributed power management. When we put one of these hosts into maintenance mode, we don't really want DPM kicking in and starting up and shutting down hosts for us, so we'll turn DPM off for the duration of the update. And then prevent remediation if hardware compatibility issues are found. That's fairly self-explanatory. Baselines, this is about performing updates. So the previous screen was about image updates. This is about patch updates. So very similar. We don't want to change the power state. We're going to try maintenance mode that many times. Do we want to enable quick boot? Disconnect removable media devices that might prevent a host from entering maintenance mode. This can be useful. What sometimes happens is you have an ISO stored in one of the disks that is local to a host, and it's attached to a VM. That will prevent that host from going into maintenance mode because it can't move that virtual machine to another host because that ISO is only available on that host. So that can be a useful feature. And then the VM rollback settings. Now you want to be very careful with this here. Lifecycle Manager can be configured to update the VMware tools in your virtual machines. When it does, it will take a snapshot of the VM first, and by default it will keep that snapshot indefinitely. And you will remember when we talked about snapshots that keeping snapshots for longer than you need them is not a good idea. So you can set this, maybe 1 hour will be enough for you to detect and deal with any problems, maybe 24. I'm going to leave it on 1. We're going to take a look at creating a new baseline. So we're going to make this a patch baseline. Extension baselines are about vSphere extensions if you have any. So those are third-party add-ons which can be added to your hosts. So you can add things such as backup products, etc. through extensions. I'm going to call this sample baseline. So on this first screen, automatically select patches. We can set criteria to automatically add patches to this baseline as they are released. So, for example, ESX 7.1 critical. So this baseline will automatically include all critical patches for ESX 7.1. Or any, or important. We can set whatever criteria we want. The point is, this is a dynamic baseline, and we can see here automatically update this baseline with patches that match following criteria. If we untick that, or if we leave it ticked, either or, we can also then go and optionally choose specific patches. The option to choose specific patches is useful where we have encountered an issue which is resolved maybe by a non-critical patch that we want to install, but we don't want to install all patches. And then we select Finish, and this is our sample baseline. I'll delete that baseline because I'm going to use the predefined ones to remediate my host.